the water's fine, homie, jump into the deep end. Sow it, you will reap it. We talking how to start it, how to grow it, how to keep it. Take a deep breath. You are now rocking with Founder Secrets.
Hi, Jim. Welcome to Founder Secrets. You know, we actually had several people on the podcast who have moved from finance into entrepreneurship. And so I'm just curious, like, how is that journey for you, you know, going from grinding it out?
But notice nobody's gone from entrepreneurship to finance.
Yeah, I guess that it doesn't go the other way. Is that right?
No, I haven't seen it yet. So. No, I think for me, it's probably similar stories to you, right? I always had the itch to be my own boss, to have a little bit more control over my day to day. And so that was part of the motivation. I also had a rather unique opportunity here to buy a family business in Linden Master. And so we actually bought it 100% outright. It wasn't given to me. We paid a fair market price for the time. So it's a little bit of a unique opportunity. So we were looking at other businesses, but at the end of the day, this was the best investment I could have possibly imagined.
So let me describe, can you share kind of how you came across the business and what made you want to buy it?
Yeah. So me and I met my business partner, Ryan, when we were at the Wharton Executive MBA program. And he was actually the one who pushed me to do the quote search funder thing, right? Was to go out and look for a business to buy. So we looked at a lot of different businesses. We looked at a software company in Duluth, Minnesota. We looked at a pallet manufacturer in Indiana. We looked at a lot of different businesses before we settled on Linden Master. And I think for us, we were really attracted to the vertical market SaaS. We really liked the dynamics of that industry, of that business model, right? And I think in the laundry industry specifically, so Linden Master is an ERP system for commercial laundries and hospitals, we really liked some of the dynamics we saw in that business, right? A lot of, frankly, as my business partners say, just a lot of good people, right? A lot of people who we wanted to work with, our customers, our vendors, right? Very down to earth. This is not, AI machine learning, right? And there's nothing wrong with AI machine learning, but it's a little bit more ethereal than putting the laundry in the washing machine and getting it out, right? It's a little bit different. We were attracted. We wanted somewhat of what people might consider a more blue collar, down to earth industry. So that was one of the things we looked at. I think there are some other things, financially about the business we like: strong growth, good SaaS metrics, good retention. So it just kind of all checked all the boxes.
I know you can't share any more recent data, but I'm wondering, can you share any of the data when you bought it in terms of revenue, even purchase price, whatever you can share? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, we bought the business for on an EBITDA basis, right? So it was doing somewhere between 2 and 3 million of revenue when we bought it. And it had very high margins, right? And it was run by a founder for cash, right? At north of 50, 60, 70% EBITDA margins. And when we bought it, we great retention, like customers love the product. It's been around for 25 years. When we bought it, we really kind of ran the SaaS playbook, right? We took EBITDA down, we invested in the product, invested in sales and marketing, and turned it into more of a growth play than a cash cow business. So that was what our primary strategy was going into, was to run the growth equity playbook at a small scale.
All right, so let me make sure I understand you right. Let's say it was doing 2 million in revenue with say $1 million in EBITDA, and you would buy it for like 10 times EBITDA, which is profit. And so you paid around 10 million for it at the time.
Yeah.
And so that would be kind of a fair.
Yeah, ballpark. Those are right numbers.
Fair market price. Because oftentimes, and we get these emails all the time with people wanting to buy your business. And I feel like it's very hawkish, as in like MBA students looking for some very, very out of the know, like old, retired, like he doesn't know what EBITDA, even actually I've met one of these guys, he doesn't know what EBITDA means. He doesn't care. He's just looking to retire. So then you could get like a real steal. But I always felt like really bad about that, because you're like really taking advantage of these old people that built a whole business, but they just kind of lost track of what it values at,
Yes. So I think, that's the search funder model, right? I think what's interesting, and my view on that is, for a lot of these business owners, right, they didn't position the business for exit, right? They were just running it for cash, right? And so, the searcher, in fairness to the searcher, they have to do a lot of work to like buy the business. It's not like they're handed a SIM with all the financial data all pretty, right? I was handed a QuickBooks file and said, hey, go figure this out. Figure out what logo churn is. Figure out what growth is. It was all cash basis, right? We had to go and redo everything in accrual accounting, right? So it was a lot of work. And so in a lot of these situations, right, where you might buy a SaaS business for a low multiple, or any business for a low multiple, there's a lot of embedded work you have to do, right? When we bought LinearMaster, it was hosted in a co-location center, but it wasn't on the cloud. And that, for years we banged our head against the wall to get it onto AWS and get it migrated. And so there was some, there's a lot of work that has to be done to these businesses sometimes. So that's kind of why you hear the multiples that you do for these businesses, because you're buying a project, right? It's like buying a fixer-upper house. It's going to take some work.
Can you walk us through what the process is like, because you got to onboard vendors, customers, employees, and I'm sure not all of it went swimmingly. You just talked about co-location to the cloud. Can you kind of talk through how you thought of that process, and also maybe what some of the missteps were or learnings there?
Yeah, so this is where I think my finance background did help me, right? Because in private equity, typically when you buy an investment, you come up with a 100-day plan, right? And so that plan varies by the investment, right? Some plans are going to require you to hire a lot of people. Some plans are going to require you to fire a lot of people, right? And it depends on the investment, right? So me and my business partner, we came up with a abbreviated 100-day plan. We didn't have a staff of associates ready to do this for us. But we came up with a 100-day plan of things we wanted to do, right? Like one of them was, get off of QuickBooks Desktop and get the QuickBooks Online, right? One of them was to bring in actually answer the phone for sales calls, right? Like LinearMaster was returning a pretty small portion of the inbound sales calls that they were getting. So there was a lot of things like that operationally that we had to do. New banks. We did an asset deal, so we had to do all new employment agreements with people. There was a lot of change that had to happen. So, so I think for us, we had created a plan, and then you're right. Not all of it went perfect, right? Some of it went very badly, and we had to redo it, right? And especially, I was not what I would have done differently is I would have brought in someone with more of a technical background than myself earlier. I like technology, and I was the technical side of the partner relationship, but I don't have the background like you do, Taylor, or some others where you've been in SaaS for a long time and understand it. So I definitely stubbed my toe quite a few times as I learned to navigate different vendors and different technologies and those kind of things.
When you first bought the business, was the intention all along, 100-day plan, let's execute these things, and then eventually we're going to sell the business? Was that kind of the idea all along?
Well, no, interestingly not. So when me and my business partner bought it, we didn't know that we could execute on the plan, right? So when you buy a small business, right, you're not entirely confident that you can take it from single-digit growth to 30% plus growth, right? So to become a growth equity company, you have to execute on that plan, right? And so for us, we ran it just to maximize value, right? So we were always a little bit in the middle of like, are we going to be a growth business, or are we going to be a cash cow business, right? And over time, it became more and more clear that we could become a growth business and get a growth multiple and do those and become the leader and the consolidator in the space. And so that's how we ended up going. I think what was another aspect of my finance experience that was important was that I set up a lot of things for exit. So for example, we got a purchase price allocation when we closed the business. We moved to accrual accounting. We got audited. We hired very good tax advisors who did a nexus study for us. So we did all of the things that we knew a growth equity firm would ask us one day if and when we were going to take an investment. We positioned the business the best we could, given the resources we had for that exit. Always thinking in private equity, you're always thinking in the back of my mind, like, what's the exit? What's the exit, right? It doesn't mean you might never exit, but at the same time, you need to think about maximizing value with that lens.
Can you, because you've kind of spoken about it was a low growth business, few percentage point growth to, let's call it 30-40% business. Talk about growth equity. Can you kind of define if someone doesn't have a finance background, like what do those things from a high level kind of mean?
Yeah, so there's really, and I think in private equity, this is an oversimplistic view of things, right? But there's growth equity investors, and then there's kind of called traditional private equity investors, right? The growth equity investors looking for high growth assets, their 20% plus growth is usually the cutoff. At 20% year over year revenue growth, you're barely making. Some people want 100% plus growth, right? And then there's the more traditional private equity route where they're looking for, 8% growth would be great for a traditional private equity. The difference is they're going to use a lot of leverage and a lot of debt on the business where the growth equity guys are not. The growth equity guys are going to put a bunch of capital on the balance sheet to hire people, to develop products. The traditional private equity firms are not. They're going to rely on the cash flow of the business. And I think it is important to think about, okay, what do I want to be when I grow up, right? Do I want to be a growth equity company, in which case, I need to really spend really hard and drive growth? Or do I want to be a traditional private equity play and be very high margin? And one of my learnings from the process over the last few years is you should really choose early. I think we came to that. We could have done even better had we made that conclusion earlier and even stepped even harder on the accelerator.
And so, how do you find it? You're two guys. By the way, this is a great ROI on your MBA in retrospective. And so, two guys out of the MBA. Sure, you have a finance background, but how do you finance a deal to pay 10 million? Let's say it was 10 million for a company. Is it you just go to a bank?
Yeah. So we used an SBA loan. Yeah. So this was another advantage I had coming from private equity, is I'd like to think I was fairly good at structuring transactions and getting them done. So we were what you call self-funded searchers. So we funded it with an SBA loan, and then we also had a seller note on top of it, and we also had our own personal equity, basically what was all of our life savings at the time.
But doesn't
we each put into the investment?
SBA loan maximum is a few million? How many million is it? 5 million?
Yeah, SBA maximum is 5 million. Yes. So we had a max. This is public knowledge, but we had a max SBA loan of 5 million.
So then half of it came from seller's note in your own personal savings.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
I just have would a seller be okay with that? When a business is making $1 million a year, are they okay with putting up several million of seller's note? Would you do that if you were a person seller?
Yeah. So the seller notes in most search fund deals have a 5+ year time frame to get paid down, and that's usually because the SBA lender they want to know that the seller is still somewhat motivated to keep the business swimming, right? So the seller note had a pretty long payback period, and the EBITDA, I gave you rough numbers. The EBITDA was a little higher than than $1 million. So that's why the math worked out. But it was you do bring up a good point. It was a highly levered transaction, and a lot of our cash flow just went to go and pay down debt. Every dollar, we took no money out of the business for years. Every dollar we had went to pay down debt or fund new products or remediate technical debt, hire salespeople. We plowed everything back into the business.
What year was this that you guys bought it in?
Yes, we bought it in 2019.
I'm wondering, to what extent do you attribute the growth to, and I'm just guessing here, knowing nothing about the business, but I only assume that when 2020 hit, there was a lot more washing of things in hospitals than before. So to what extent? Yeah,
Actually, no. Actually, volumes in healthcare declined pretty significantly for laundries. And the reason was because two reasons. A, surgeries basically stopped, right? So nobody who had a quote elective surgery. Now, elective surgeries are not really elective. It's not optional whether you want to get it done. It's just deferrable, right? And so people who they may need a knee replacement, you would defer that rather than going to a hospital. So that volume went away. And then they also found, interestingly enough, is that COVID patients used much less linen than your average patient. And part of that had to do with the fact that the nurses didn't want to go, or not nurses, sorry, the staff couldn't go in there to change the linen as frequently. So there were some complications, but no, it was, our customers our healthcare customers were all great. They continued to pay as always. And, we worked with the ones that couldn't on the hospitality side to cut breaks. We had some large hospitality customers that we had to renegotiate with. So,
so your revenue went down during COVID.
Yeah, 2020 was, I think, a flat year for us. We were able to offset some of the COVID things with other growth we were having.
So where did the growth come from then, especially during COVID times and yeah, to today?
Yeah, so we created a couple new add-on, post-COVID, we created a couple new add-on products. We created an advanced reporting product. We created a cubicle curtain tracking product. And really we just invested more in sales and marketing, right? And to capture more of the TAM that's out there. It's a bigger TAM than people. It's not an infinitely large TAM, but it's a bigger TAM than.
I know you mentioned that the salespeople were not returning inbound phone calls.
They really didn't have any salespeople when we bought the business, so we started doing outbound sales. So, yeah.
Okay, well, we're not knocking the previous people. It's just I'm curious at what point did you figure that out? And was that kind of luck that you stumbled across this, or was this part of a checklist that you were going down saying, how do you do this? How do you do this before? I'm just curious, like what your thought process was before buying the business to see those opportunities.
Yeah, so on the sales side, my business partner Ryan is really the sales guy. I was more of the technical and AWS side. But for us, what was part of the diligence, we asked for a list of all of the tickets that they had brought in, had gotten over the years, right? So every time somebody would call, they would log a ticket in this on-premise software called iSupport. So we eventually moved that to Salesforce Service Cloud, but that's one of the many things that we did. But anyway, we went through all the tickets manually, all the 1,000 tickets over 10 years or whatever, several thousand. And we took notes on them. And then we saw hey, this person called in and they said, hey, I really like to buy your product. Can I pay with a credit card? Because that's the only way I can pay. And you would just say no. And that would be the end of the sales process. So, there wasn't even well, can we talk about it? So there were a lot of things like that a lot of it was just, brute force of going through data and saying, hey, what happened here? What did the customer say? What did the customer like or dislike? And there's a lot of combing through what data was available.
And how did you? I assume that was part of the process for also the new product add-ons and the items that you were just talking about. I'm just curious, where you thought about investing. How did you all decide where to invest in new when you did take over the business?
Well, so on the new product, we never had enough capital, and this is one of my learnings. Right, I would have been even more aggressive about raising capital probably and investing it. Is we took a lot of customer feedback, right? So developing Curtain Master was an idea that came from our largest customer. And the prior owner had said no, he didn't want to do it because he was happy and he was going to retire and he didn't want to spend a year or 18 months developing a new product, ancillary product. So a lot of it came from customer feedback, right? It was hey, I really could use custom reporting. I really could use cubicle curtain tracking. That was our primary resource, and just listening to the customer where perhaps their voice wasn't heard before. That was our primary way of soliciting feedback there. But in terms of the more tactical decision of how do we allocate capital was always a struggle, right? Because we basically started with revenue, and then we started with we got the mandatory things we got to do, like pay people and pay servers and stuff like that. And then what do we have left out of EBITDA? It's okay, well, we have to pay down debt, and we have a lot of debt, so we got to do that. And then this little sliver we have left, right? How will we allocate that to the other remaining projects? And it was each year we usually had a different goal, right? We would sit down at the beginning of the year, we'd do a budget, and we'd say, this year we're gonna totally modernize our tech stack and we're gonna move AWS, or we're gonna do, next year we're gonna develop this cubicle curtain tracking. The next project we're gonna do an advanced reporting product. So we usually had an annual cycle where we decided what capital we were gonna allocate to what projects.
So just to be clear, what was the software you said that you built that the previous owner didn't want to build?
Yeah, we called it Curtain Master, but what it is, it's a cubicle curtain tracking product. It's taken longer to get off the ground, but it's being just deployed now and sold now. But what it does is it monitors the cubicle curtain rotations inside a hospital. So if you go to a hospital, right, they might have a piece of cloth in front of the door that the doctor moves around as they go in the bed. They may separate the beds in some hospitals that have rooms with multiple beds. And those things are basically never washed. So if you go to a hospital, don't touch them, because most hospitals have an as soiled standard. So when somebody vomits on it or gets blood on it, then they'll change it. And what they find is there's a lot of public data on this. The CDC finds that they have MRSA, and also they carry a lot of infections in them. And so the product is designed to increase compliance with laundering them, or if they're disposable, to take them down and put new ones up. And so that's the product that we developed with some guidance from one of our largest customers.
Your products, I just want to understand, do you actually wash it, or do you only keep track of whether it's being washed or not?
No, we're just the software vendor for the commercial laundries or the hospital that's laundering it.
So it's the software. You still got to rely on somebody to take it down, wash it,
right,
and then log it in the software, I suppose. And
so you're right. So that the goal of the software is to make it super seamless and easy for the person to notate that, right? Because they're not today. It's usually not being done at all, and if it is being done, it's probably being done.
Well, I'm wondering what your adoption is. Like, our thing with SaaS was always like, a lot of people don't use it. And I'm wondering with you guys, is there any incentive for the nurses, the cleaning staff? I mean, maybe they just clean it, but never use the software. Does that happen a lot? Or
yeah.
not?
So the incentive for the hospital is to reduce hospital-acquired infections, right? And so that if your HAIs, hospital-acquired infections, get too high, you start to lose Medicare reimbursement. Or I shouldn't say that. Right? There starts to be penalties to your Medicare reimbursement, and I think the bigger problem too is people will just avoid your hospital. Right? You can go on Leapfrog and find data on hospital-acquired infections for all sorts of hospitals, and so that's one of the major incentives for hospitals. Some do it well, and some do it poorly. Just like some hospitals do surgeries well, and some do it poorly. Right? And so that's yes, you're never going to get 100%. Adoption for it, but that's the primary driver for it, is to save lives and reduce infections.
What is the new? Is it max toleration?
Max iterations, yeah.
Yeah. What is that? And is that the focus now?
Yeah. So we're still heavily involved with Linden Master. We're doing a lot of M&A right now, which is pretty exciting. Max iterations is a new product. Me and Ryan, my business partner, Linden Master, he's also involved with that. But what the product does is it solves a big problem for small business owners in this country. So we got an SBA loan ourselves when we did Linden Master, right? We went out and had to do, SBA loans are kind of interesting, right? Because there's a very strict government process about what you need to do to get the SBA loan. You can go on the SBA.gov website and look it up. But one of those, and one of the most, probably annoying one of them, is you have to provide projections for your business, right? As part of that. That's required by law, right? No bank can waive that. And so there's, tens of thousands of SBA loans being underwritten in this country every year. It's something like 50,000 plus. And so I had a finance background, right? So it was relatively, I would say, easy, but I could put together a model that I could present to a bank and they would be happy with. And so your average small business owner, if you own a bodega down the street here in New York City and you're getting an SBA loan, you still have to put the projections together, right? But your core competency is probably not putting financial projections together. So think about this as a TurboTax for SBA loans, right? It goes through and walks you through each question and says, hey, what was your revenue last year? And if you don't know what revenue is, you can click a button and it will explain that to you on a little side panel like TurboTax does. You can chat with someone. So the idea is that it really makes it more seamless for a small business owner to get an SBA loan if they're not a financial expert.
Were you like this in the finance world too? Because it seems like you're almost an idea machine. Like you see these opportunities and then either you want to start it or invest in it or acquire. Like, were you like this all along, or did this freedom come about when you left the old world?
It really came post that. I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. I said, that's not for me. It's too risky, and I'm not interested in that. Right? Even today, I don't. I think the word entrepreneur is kind of a strange loaded term, right? Because the guy who starts a successful construction business or plumbing business, he doesn't consider himself an entrepreneur. He's just like, I'm a constructor, or I'm in plumbing, right? And so, I think for us, we just, we get excited about new opportunities and coming up with new things now. And so this is just the latest thing where we saw, a pain point we had or a pain point we had seen. And, we also got to be in, it's also a vertical market software, which is something we really like. So that's how we decided to work on it. And so we're just about launching it now.
And it's interesting. I'm curious what how you see it differently going into a business that already had customers, revenue, profit, versus with max iterations, really starting from nothing, no customers, no revenue, no brand. How's that been different?
It's been very different. It's been one of the biggest learnings over the past 12 to 18 months is it's a totally different ballgame, right? So not buying a business is hard for sure. And I respect it a lot, but to me, it's a somewhat easier problem than getting to dollar one of revenue, right? Can be really challenging depending on the business. And so I think especially for SaaS, when you have to invest so much up front and then you can, get the return, it's definitely, I think that the biggest learning is you have to be willing to pivot, right? Like you have to be willing to pivot in terms of your strategy, right? I mean, I think when we started Max Iterations, we thought we were just going to walk into a bank and be like, hey, buy this, it's going to be great. And now we've learned that's not how it works, right? And so we have our first customer just last week, which we just signed up, but we're excited about that. But, we have to pivot and be flexible with a new business. You just can't have the same. With LinenMaster, it was more, how do we not screw it up, right? We have a business, it's great. Let's give it some more growth, but let's not lose any customers, right? Here it's like, well, we got to get the first customer. So how are we going to pivot and find that niche?
How is your pitch different in that scenario? Like when you're pitching that first customer, what is your pitch in that case? Because you almost don't have any background, right? There's no history to kind of rely on or case studies or anything. What did you use as the story there?
Yeah, so there we're actually working with someone who helped us get the loan for LinenMaster, and I think they're betting on us as individuals as much as they are betting on us. They know our track record and our reputation. They're betting on us as individuals as much as they're betting on the product itself, right? And so a little bit of it is selling the team, I think, for that first customer, not so much selling the product as it is today, right? We're selling us as a team and the dream of what the product will be, not, hey, this is the product is today. It's going to be great.
I have a question around, you've mentioned your business partner several times, and I'm curious because this is a big question for a lot of people. They don't know how to select good partners, or they don't like what makes a good partner. Like, can you kind of talk through what that process is like in your head? And now you're starting a new business with them. Like, what's that process like? How do you think of that? And what advice would you have to someone maybe choosing a business partner today?
So this is something that always comes up in EO, YPO, right? Because you meet a lot of people who are single founders, and I can't, for me at least, I cannot, to me, express the importance of having a business partner. I would not have been successful. I don't think I would have been successful buying LinenMaster or getting investment in LinenMaster or developing new products without a business partner, right? So for me, obviously, someone who was a friend and who we got along great with in business school, right? So that was number one, right? Number two was complementary skills, right? So he has more of a people management and sales focus, which is very good. And I have more of a technical focus. And these are broad terms, right? It's not that, we can't morph a little bit depending on the day, but that's really where our interests lie and our skills are at. So that was a big criteria. And then also balance of attitudes helps too, right? Like he's always the glass half full. I'm going to run through a wall. I'm going to run through this brick wall behind me and make the sale. And I'm more like, hey man, don't destroy the wall because we got to keep the trains running on time. And those are the things we have a good balance of attitude too that helps us succeed. So that's I think he would say the same thing. So having a mix of that, I think that makes for a successful relationship with the business partner.
Well, one of the big decisions in that is really when and how to get out. And I'm wondering, how did you guys agree on the timing to?
It was actually like it was a big, debate, right? Is we always had a debate of like, well, what's going to be are we going to exit? If we're going to, what's the point at which we do, right? And so, we talked about it over the years, and we kind of came to a conclusion of like, hey, if we got to this number, this is where we both be happy with the risk reward equation. So we talked about it frequently. It wasn't like we got an offer and then we said, hey, like, let's sit down and talk about this. There was a lot of discussion over the years about like, well, what is the goal and what is the number and what's going to make us all, happy with this as a journey. And so talking about it frequently, I think is a positive.
And so you had that number. So when the opportunity came, you were able to more easily decide like, okay, let's pursue this since we already agreed this would be where we both would want to go.
Right. Yep.
And I guess I quickly looked on LinkedIn, and you're sharing some of the staff, and I've had a challenge with this too in the new business. Is like, how do you, obviously when you sell, the staff has to stay there for the new buyer, but also if you have a new business, often the best people I've already recruited in the old business. So to what extent can you share those resources, or how do you go about that right now?
Yeah, I think when you're two guys and you have two different businesses, it's easy, right? I shouldn't say it's easier, right? It's certainly a discussion about where the priorities lie. Right now, once you go and get outside investment, right, you now have to disclose everything and have a timeline, and that's not going to work forever, right? Eventually you're going to have to kind of separate those, right? But it certainly does help, I would say, for new ventures. It de-risks new ventures a lot if you can leverage talent from your old ventures, right? And so we did do that. I think the ability to do that now is less non-existent given the growth equity investment. So that's going to phase out over time. And it's been all agreed to. But that's really what we're it's definitely helped us, but there's definitely limits to that once you start taking out outside capital.
I have a question around, I know that you can't share the number, but I'm curious what the thought process was like when you and your partner were talking about what is the number. Like, was his number much different than yours, or did you all kind of arrive at this compromise, or what were all those talks like? Like, did you just kind of meld in the middle? Like, how did that go?
It was a compromise for sure, because he's like I said, he's the glass half full guy. I'm the glass half empty guy, right? So I was much more willing to say, no, this is like we're at a point now where we want to, it takes some growth capital. He's much more, no, it's got to be higher, right? So we got to over the years of discussing the risks, the pros and the cons of it. We kind of met in the middle between those two, so to speak. That's how we got to the number. It was a several year process of talking about it and thinking about it. And what are our goals in life too?
How do you think about community in these scenarios? And by this, I mean, you're an EO, we're all on EO.
Mm-hmm.
Like how do you think of, like, how important are peer groups like that during this process, or was it not as valuable because you kind of already had the background?
No, my EO, my forum was very valuable in this discussion, right? I think what's kind of interesting about that is that, EO is a group of people who they currently own their business, right? Not a lot of people have done an exit, right? So there was certainly what I found most helpful with my EO group is talking about what the personal side of it is, right? Like, this is now a meaningful time for you to take on some outside investment, or is it not, right? What is the pro and con for you personally? Not so much like, is this the right thing for the business at the time? Because they hadn't been to it. So it was really helpful to have the support of it was really helpful to have the support of my EO forum and the rest of the EO.
I wanted to ask, okay, so who have been kind of your mentors or influences on you that you've learned from, or it could be books, podcasts, any sort of resources you've used to excel?
Yeah, and again, this may seem like a broken record, but I think I couldn't have gotten here without having a partner, right? For me, that was really instrumental to my journey. And so for some people, I know a lot of people, they are hugely successful entrepreneurs without a partner. For me, I can assure you, I would never have even made the leap had I not had a partner who could, encourage me, guide me, et cetera. So that was a big part of it. And this is, not to be a cliche, but definitely, my mother was always involved in business and was very, passionate about, she left, a big company, big Fortune 100 company after many years and started her own business and was very, has been successful in it so far. And now she started her own consulting business. Now she has her own venture-backed company as well in the mental health care space. So I think for her encouraging, me to go into business was always kind of an important part of my life.
Your mom.
Yeah, so.
Your mom did consulting and then started a VC-backed startup?
So my mom was at a Fortune 100 healthcare company. And she left that business. I think it was mutual on both of the, some new leadership came in and she got basically reorged out, as I understand the story. started doing consulting, ended up consulting for a private equity firm that also has a VC arm. It's a healthcare investment company that has both PE and VC, and is now started a business with backing from the VC. And so she's doing the fundraising thing now for the second time, and so that's been an interesting thing to bond with her about and talk about. So, but it was like me. It was not her first career. She didn't start in
really awesome.
entrepreneurship. She started working for the man in a Fortune 100 company and working her way up, and dealing with the change in leadership and like politics and stuff like that. And she found that later in life, right? So
I guess, what advice do you have for someone that's out there right now working for the man and maybe doesn't think entrepreneurship is for them, or maybe they do, they're just kind of unsure? What advice do you have for that person?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think, it obviously is possible, right? I mean, a lot of people who are in finance and they're unhappy with their position. I mean, a lot of people who are happy in finance.
I don't think there's anybody happy.
Great. So I don't need to begrudge that as a career. But I do meet people who, finance, you can make a lot of money and be unhappy, like a lot of careers, right? And so I meet a lot of people who say, "Oh, I'd love to do this." I'd say, number one is don't let your lifestyle get ahead of yourself, right? So in finance, you typically are making good money, right? And you can afford a good lifestyle. And if you allow yourself to spend all of it, right, it's going to be very hard for you to go and do, what we did, right? We didn't make any money for years, right? We've been pulling money out of the master. Now, luckily, both Ryan and I were supported by our wives as well, so we could, meet in the middle there. We didn't lose all of our income, but it would have been challenging had we built a lifestyle that required us to keep in those jobs all the time. So that's, I think, the big lesson I've learned out of leaving finances. I see too many people say, I really wish I could do that, but I got 2 kids in private school and I got the summer home in the Hamptons, and I got
Hamptons house mortgage.
It doesn't matter what it is, but everyone's got a thing that can weigh them down, right? And so that, I think, is the biggest lesson of this.
Yeah. Anything you want to plug, Jim? Like what would you like to plug to the audience?
No, I think, again, I encourage anyone who has a finance background, if you're analyst, associate, VP at an investment bank, private equity firm, this is, definitely something that you can do. And I think personally, me and Ryan now, we look for people to back in our investments, right? So we'd love to meet people who come from a finance background, have that drive, have that energy, are looking for something with perhaps a little less income today, but way more upside. We would love to back you. So we'd love to have you reach out to us and find a fund.
How can they find you?
So the easiest, I guess that's a good point. I should probably create a holding company for like these investments, right? But finding me through Max Iterations is the easiest way to do it now. So you can, my email is on there, LinkedIn. You can look at Max Iterations, James Adler, and you can find that one. So thank you, Taylor, for pointing out something I should be doing, which is coming up with a more general contact for our investments. It's something me and Ryan actually talked about this morning. Is like, we should probably set up something and have expenses through that. And I'll make sure to do it. But for now, it's easiest to find me at the Max Iterations website or on my LinkedIn.
All right.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it, Jim.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you for rocking with the homies. Taylor, Trusty, and Flavio. Seize the day, own it. Until next time, hold it down, hold it down. Hey.